How to find your purpose as an entrepreneur. So let me tell you a quick story of how I almost missed out on a $50,000 investment. So I remember back in college, I was trying to decide what do I want to do after I got my bachelor's degree. So I'm sitting around and I'm thinking and I decided that I wanted to become a high school counselor. And to do that, I needed to go get my master's degree. So I started applying to schools and I ended up getting accepted into Clemson University. So when I got there, I was excited. It was great. I was learning all about how to be a counselor. So from the different techniques and theories and every way you can think of to help a kid or student that is going through tough times, that is experiencing anxiety or depression, I was learning how to help that student to be able to become their best versions of themselves so that they can graduate and get a great job or start a business or go to college or wherever the case may be. But there was one big issue. Once I graduated from college and I started working in the high schools, I realized that the job that I was doing wasn't the job that I was preparing for in college. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. So when I started working in the high schools, I realized that I was doing 90% paperwork. So I was sending emails, changing schedules. I was returning phone calls, voicemails. Like it was bad. And I was only doing 10% of what I wanted to do, which was speaking to the students and helping them. And this really defeated me. And it was so defeating that 6 months into the job, I actually thought about quitting. Something that I haven't told anyone was that actually during that time, I was looking at MBA degrees, finance degrees, and marketing degrees because I realized, hey, I needed to get out of this field quickly. And what the crazy part is that literally 6 months ago, I just graduated from Clemson and just spent $50,000 on this degree that I probably won't even use anymore. And I'm like, geez, what a bonehead mistake. But then something happened one day. So I was talking to a friend of mine who was actually working with me, and we started talking about, my frustrations and how much I didn't like being a high school counselor. And he asked me a question that changed my life. He said, have you ever thought about being a therapist? And I stopped and I paused and I was like, no. I did think about being a therapist because I wanted to be a high school counselor. But then it actually hit me that a lot of the classes that I took in college were actually some of the same classes that I needed to take to become a therapist. So I remember sitting and thinking, you know what? Maybe I should give this a shot. Maybe I should become a therapist. So what I ended up doing was going back to school for just 2 classes because that's all I needed. And then after that summer, I was able to become a therapist and start working with actual clients. And this changed everything for me. And what actually changed wasn't just my pockets. I didn't just make more money, but I actually started to get more happier. I started to feel more fulfilling. I started to love what I was doing because what ended up happening was that instead of doing 90% of paperwork and returning phone calls and emails, I actually started doing 90% of counseling, the very thing that I wanted to do. And this absolutely changed everything for me. Can you imagine what it would feel like to have a business or a job that you actually love and that you actually made a good living for? That is the sweet spot that so many people are looking for. Because for a lot of people, they have a good job, but it's not fulfilling. Or they have something that's fulfilling, but they're not making a lot of money. And that's the pitfall that a lot of people fall into. And in this podcast, what I want to talk to you guys about is why your purpose is so important. And then 2, how to actually go about finding that purpose. So before I get into point 1, make sure you subscribe to this channel. And something that I love telling people is that by subscribing to this channel, you're getting firsthand knowledge and advice from a licensed therapist, something that not a lot of people have access to. A lot of therapists will charge you for the information that I'm giving you, and I'm giving to you absolutely free. So go ahead and subscribe to that channel, and let's go ahead and get started with point number 1. So point number 1 as to why it's important to find your purpose actually comes from a quote from Tony Robbins. And he says that success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure. And it's like, yo, that makes a lot of sense. People out here, they're very successful. They're working really hard. They're spending days, nights, weekends trying to accomplish some goal that will only later lead to more lack of fulfillment, more questioning of what their purpose is or what they should be doing here on earth. And that can be really, really tough. Tony Robbins, he talks about in a book where he actually interviewed hundreds of millionaires and even billionaires. And something that he realized was that not too many of them was actually happy. He found that a lot of them actually struggle still with things like depression or self-worth and things of that nature. And for us, people that aren't making millions or billions of dollars, we're thinking, how is that possible? Someone that's making so much money, how could they possibly have any issues, problems, sadness, mental health issues, or anything like that? And the question is because they're lacking that sense of fulfillment. You know, what's funny is there's actually a psychological bias that I want to tell you guys about. And it's called hedonic adaptation, okay? Hedonic adaptation. Some people also call this hedonic treadmill, okay? The hedonic treadmill. But basically what it states is that people who are, let's say, looking for a sense of happiness, or people that are looking to accomplish a goal because they believe that it'll bring them happiness, what they'll realize is that they will first get an initial spike of happiness. So this happens when you buy a new car, you buy a new house, you get a new relationship, you get married, you have your first kid, you make your first sale online, or you have your first year where you're making 6 figures or 7 figures. So we have that initial spike of happiness. And what tends to happen is that over time, we start to adapt to that happiness, to where that big house that you just bought just becomes another house. That 2024 McLaren that you bought is now 3 years old, 4 years old, and there's now more cars that are more newer or more better, if you will. What I'm trying to say is that the mind starts to adapt. It starts to get used to the happiness that this goal initially brought. And then the third part, what happens is that we tend to return back to that original baseline of happiness that we had before this initial spike, before we had this initial goal that we hit. This is why we tell, especially us as therapists, we tell clients and even people listening to podcast episodes like this, we tell you guys that materialistic things will not bring long-lasting happiness. The only thing that can do that is your purpose, is following your values. And when you follow your values, you will actually increase that baseline that you were originally at. Because when your baseline is really high, when you accomplish those goals and you have those spikes of happiness, you're going to come back down to a baseline that is already high, okay? That is already high. That's already at this peak position, if you will. So what I try to tell you guys is that goal that you're trying to accomplish, see it as the cherry on top, the whipped cream on top. What we want to focus on is your basis, so the ice cream that's underneath it or the cake that's underneath it. That is what we want to focus on, and we want to build on that. So again, what I'm trying to say is that success without happiness is the ultimate failure. It's the fulfillment that we really, really need to focus on. And I'll even add this point before I go to the second point of why this is important. I want to ask you guys a question. How many things in your current life that you have are things that you once prayed for, things that you once dreamed about having, things that you once aspired to have? Now, here's the thing. I asked that question because for a lot of people, they prayed to be married. They prayed to have a degree or to have a nice job or to drive this nice car. And once they have it, as I said before, they have the happiness, but that happiness starts to dwindle over the course of time. And what we start to realize is that I'm still empty. There's still something missing. And I want you guys to see that right now, there's a lot of things that you have in your life that you've asked for and you have it. And what we want to do is we want to break that cycle of wishing for something, getting it, and then still feeling a sense of emptiness, a sense of lack of fulfillment. And the only way to actually fill that hole is to find your purpose, which is what this podcast is all about. So with that being said, let's go to point number 2. So point number 2 as to why finding your purpose is important is because when you find your purpose, everything else gets easier. You know, I can say with confidence that there's nothing on this earth that I would rather be doing than to be speaking to you about how to increase your mental health, your sense of fulfillment, your happiness, how to become better husbands, fathers, entrepreneurs, mothers, wives, right? Like there's nothing else on this earth that I would rather be doing. And if by some chance they were to ban being a therapist all throughout the world, I'd probably be one of those guys in a cave somewhere, helping people to still become better husbands, fathers, wives, daughters, all that stuff that I just mentioned. What I'm trying to say is that this is what I've been put on this earth to do. I know for a fact that I am walking in my purpose. And the reason why that's so important and the reason why that makes everything so much easier is because now the path has been chosen. What I mean by this path is that when I decided to start this job or this business rather, as an entrepreneur, as a therapist, I knew there was going to be a lot of tough times. I knew that there was going to be some internal doubt. But even with all that stuff being said, I still knew that I needed to push and be persistent on this path to accomplishing these goals. So what I started to do was spend more time focusing on what I needed to do instead of focusing on, is this the right thing to do? Because guys, let's face it, we only have so much mental capacity, mental energy to use, to expend. And what I see is that for a lot of people, they spend a lot of mental energy trying to overcome doubts, trying to figure out their path. But if you know what your path is, all the other questions, they become non-existent. Because now we're not focusing on how do we do something. We're more so focusing on like, what is it that I'm doing? What is it that I should be doing? Okay. So what I'm trying to say here, guys, is that the people that are able to move the fastest and to be the most successful, these are the people that aren't spending much time questioning, are they on the right path? They know they're on the right path. And now that they know that, they spend more time focusing on the strategy and less time worrying on if they can do it. Okay. And I'll even add this last point before I leave and go to the next point. But something that I always ask my clients before the session starts is, how you doing? And they tell me that they're doing good. And then they always ask me the question right back. And I typically have the same answer. And the answer is, hey, I'm doing great. And the reason why is because in that moment, I'm doing exactly what I want to do, which is speaking to them. I mean, think about it. If you were on a vacation, or let's say you were on a roller coaster, or even eating at your favorite restaurant, and someone were to ask you how you're doing, you're probably going to tell them, yeah, I'm doing great. And the reason why is because you're doing something that you love. You're doing something that you enjoy. This is what I mean by everything in life just gets easier. When you find your purpose, there's so many things that you just don't have to worry about. And that is why it's important. Now that we focused on why finding your purpose is important, now we want to get to the hows. So the first point that I want to tell you into how to actually find your purpose is that I need you to actually stop and write down all the things that you love about your job or about your business. Now, this is something that I personally had to do in my own job. There's things that I love doing, such as going into the classrooms and speaking to the kids about college or how to be confident, how to overcome life problems, right? So if at home things weren't really going well, or they were going through, your parents were going through a divorce, or let's say financially, they didn't have a good, let's say, foundation, if you will. One of my favorite moments was actually going into those classes and just hitting on all those key points, because I knew that the kids were actually about to graduate, and I knew that they needed to have this information for the summer hit. So what I realized from that is that speaking to people is something that I love doing. And what I actually hated doing was being all in the paperwork, or all in the weeds, as we typically say. And what I want you to do is I want you to actually stop and ask yourself, what do I actually love about my job? Even if you don't like your job, there are parts about your job that you actually love. And it may be something really, really small. I want you guys to start to write those things down. And what we want to do is we want to start to focus on the jobs or the businesses that allow you to do 90% or even 100% of those things that you just listed. Because when you do that, you will truly find what it is that you should be doing on this earth. And here's another thing too. As I said, things will get easier in life, yes. But something else that I didn't mention is that you will find your performance will start to increase as well. And it will increase because you're fully engaged with the thing that you're passionate about. You're fully engaged with this job or this business that you love. When I worked as a high school counselor, guys, believe me when I said, I showed up and I did my work, but as soon as it was time to leave, I was out of there. There was no putting in extra time. There's no going out of my way, if you will. Occasionally I would, but I just wasn't fulfilled. And once I started to feel that lack of fulfillment, I knew that it was time to leave. So same thing for you. What I want you to do is actually just make that list and then actually follow it. Try to actually find, and I'll give you this tip too. Go into Chat GPT and type in, what jobs have all of these duties, all of these tasks as a requirement. When you do that, you should get a list of jobs that you are perfect for. And all you got to start doing is either apply it to them or start taking the necessary courses or get the education, the degrees that will allow you to actually get applied or hired for that job, if you will. Main point number 2 as to how to find your purpose. And this is a real simple one that I love. But I want you to ask yourself this question. What memories do I want to look back on when I'm 80 years old? What memories do I want to look back on when I'm 80 years old? What we want to do is we want to start to reverse engineer the life that we want. And to do that, we need to first put ourselves in that future state. There's this thing called the stages of development. And I believe it's by Erickson, who is a psychologist. But he talks about the different stages of development, the different stages of life. And one of the final stages that people go through is typically from age 60 to about 80. And it's called integrity versus despair. And what this stage is all about, it's all about the person reflecting on their life and either looking back on it with excitement, appreciation, or a sense of integrity, meaning that they did the things that they knew that they were supposed to do. They were the person that they believed they needed to be. Or they look back on that life with a sense of despair or a sense of regret. And what we want to do is we want to avoid the despair by asking ourselves, when I'm at that point in my life, what do I want to be true about the life that I live? When I look back on my life 80 years from now, what is it that I want to see? When you have that, it will give you the answers that you need in terms of what you should be doing. Now, I've talked about confidence in a few episodes, but this is actually where confidence is just so key. Because right now, you may be looking on some things that maybe you don't feel less confident, or it may feel a little fuzzy, right? And I'll tell you, the person you're going to be 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, they will be the person that is actually good enough to accomplish these goals. So what I want you to do is actually dream big. I want you to dream so big that it actually scares you, because who you are today, yeah, it may scare you, but who you will become will look at that goal and they will actually laugh at it. That's where I want you guys to put yourself. So think back 80 years from now, or when you're 80 years old, when I look back on my life, who do I want to be? What goals do I want to look back and say that I've accomplished? What memories do I want to be true that I want to possess in my life? All right, the next point of how to find your purpose comes from a simple question. And I remember when I was asked it, it touched me. It really lit me up. But the question is if you walked into a room of 1,000 people, what would you say you're the best in, right? If you walked into a random room of 1,000 people you didn't know, what would you feel confident in saying that you're the best at, right? Meaning that you're better than 999 of the other people that's in that room. What would you say? For me, I would say that it's my ability to build rapport with people. I feel like that's something that I'm really great at. And as a result, naturally, I'm a therapist, something that requires a lot of rapport building. The question for you is the same, and I want you to try to really come up with an answer, because that answer will again show you what skills you have, but also what job or business. And I'll even say this, what your superpower is. These are the things that's going to be crucial in finding out what that purpose is. And I can even ask you, are you acting on that purpose today? So for me, like I said, it's my ability to build rapport. For you, maybe it's your ability to lead or stay focused, whatever the case it may be. I would ask, are you doing that today? How can you incorporate that skill in your job, your business? I can even say within your personal relationships. How can you show that? This would be you walking into that purpose. So I really want you to actually sit and think about that. Don't be mad or sad if you don't come up with the answer instantly, or if it takes you a little while. Like, really take a moment to think about, what is it that you feel that you're the best at? If you walked into a room of 1,000 people, what do you feel that you're the best at in any given room that you walk in? And then the last point of how to find your purpose, and this is an absolute great one, and it's going to actually touch you a little bit here. But this last one, and it comes in the form of a question: what problems in the world gets you absolutely upset? Now you may be asking, like, what does that have to do with my purpose? Well, here's the thing. Your purpose, your values, these things, they're tied to things that we value, but also things that hurt us, that pains us to see. For some people, their life's purpose is to eradicate things like homelessness, or let's say hunger, right? Or insufficient health resources, right? So in different parts of the world, they may not have access to quality care. There's so many things out there. For me, it's being able to help eradicate mental health issues. This is something that I see, and it actually touches me very, very deeply because of some personal stories I have when it comes to mental health. So for you, what gets you upset in this world? Is it, let's say, drugs? Is it the lack of education, right? Is it some of the inequalities in education? I want to know what it is. And when you find that answer, that would also show you what you should be doing in this world. I can even ask you this. What groups of people do you find are, let's say, the most vulnerable, right? For some people, this may be kids. It may be the homeless, as I said earlier. It may be people of certain communities, right? So it could be the Black and brown communities. It could be the Asian communities. It could be, the Hispanic community, so many different things, right? This will help you to find out what you should be doing, but who you should also be doing this with. In other words, what I'm trying to say is this will help you to find out who you should be serving, which is a big part of purpose. I once heard someone say that passion is something that you love doing, and your purpose is you sharing that passion with other people. So if you're passionate about, let's say, cooking or fishing, your purpose on this earth will be to show or to teach other people or even entertain other people on how to fish or how to cook, how to sew, how to play basketball, whatever the case it may be. Your purpose is something that is outside of you, it's bigger than you. And that's something that I think Tony Robbins was trying to get at. So what I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to refresh or rather conclude these main points. And also, like I said earlier, make sure you subscribe to this channel so you can continue to get information like this. So first, I went over two main points of why finding your purpose is just so important. And the first one was that success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure. And that is a quote by Tony Robbins. The second point that I made was that when you find your purpose, everything in life gets so much easier. That's because the path has been chosen. Now, the first way to actually how to find your purpose, right? So we talked about why, but the first way to find your purpose is to start to notice all the things that you love about your business or your job. And what you want to do is you want to find jobs or businesses where you're doing 90% or 100% of those tasks. Now, the second way is actually to ask yourself, when I'm 80 years old and I look back on my life, what is it that I want to be true about my life? What memories do I want to have? And this is going back to the integrity versus despair, which is, again, a stage of development from Erickson. Next, you can ask yourself, if you walked in a room of 1,000 people, what would you say that you're the best at? What skill do you possess that is better than everybody else in that room? That'd be a great question for you to ask, because that will show you not only your purpose, but also your superpower. And you can take that and you can implement it in your business, your jobs, even your personal life. And then last, ask yourself what problems in this world gets you upset. And the reason why is because your pain and your passions, they are deeply tied together, okay? When you find that, you'll find what you should be doing, or rather who you should be serving. And this is a great way to find your purpose. So this is Coach Wells, and thank you for checking out this podcast episode. And I can't wait to see you for the next one.